All right, hello, welcome to day 3 of arrays. And they're just used to store data. Remember, the data has to have the same type. So you can see in our warm-up question here, we have some string. We have an array of strings. And then we change one of the values. And then I want to know what's printed off here by these lines of code. And then what is wrong with this. So pause the video and see if you can answer these warm-up questions before continuing. All right, so names.1, remember the indexes start actually at 0. So this is actually the 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 positions. So they start counting at 0, not 1. And so printing out names position 1 will just be the original name there, Curly. The first one is Curly. And then for position 4, that's actually not going to be dash. It originally was dash, but we've overwritten it with Peter. So that's going to be Peter. And then as far as the last question goes here, dot length, that's sort of normal. So there's 5 names here, so the length is 5 for this particular array. And remember that is fixed. Once you initialize it this way, you can always have just 5 values. You can change them, right? Like we changed the one in position 4 to be Peter, but you can't change how many there are. Okay, and that's actually the problem with this last line here is the indexes go 0 to 4, so this will give you an array index bounds, out of bounds exception. So we'll just call this out of bounds exception. Right, basically there is no position 5. We only have position 0 to 4 for our indexes for this particular array. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to do some common algorithms with arrays. So once you have a set of values, there's lots of things we might want to do. Okay, so one, we might want to display them. We want to find the lowest score. So we're going to do IQs here. And our lowest IQ is Mr. Schulzenberg, of course. I'm just kidding. He's probably a genius. Who the heck knows? But anyways, we're also going to write a loop that adds 5 to all the values in the array, and then one that finds the average of the IQs in the array. So we're going to make an array, and then we're going to write these algorithms, right? And we're also going to mesh together what we learned last chapter, which was about methods. Okay, so we're going to write one program here and then make a bunch of methods that do these different tasks. Okay, and they're actually kind of handy because there'll be lots of times this chapter you want to display the values, so you'll have that method available to you at the end of today's coding. Okay, so before we dive into it too much, with methods from last chapter, we had a return type and then an input, right? And so you can actually input array because it's just a data type, a variable type. So you can input it as your input parameter. And that actually, when we do main, right, when you have that main method, that finally makes sense now. This string bracket args means that main is actually takes in a set of strings as input. And you can actually specify these arguments in a certain way. I forget how to do it in Eclipse, but you can actually pass things into your main method in Java. Okay, and similarly, you can have it return. So we can have a method, this example here, sort integers, takes in an array of ints and also returns one. So you can pass them both in and have them return just like any other variable type. Okay, and then just one other final note I want to make here before we go into the actual coding is that when you create an array and you don't specify it, remember it sets it to default. So for integers, it sets it to 0 as the default. For doubles and stuff, it's 0.0. And then if you have like a reference type, like a string in your array, it's going to default them to null. So I think I covered that a little bit in the other videos, but I want to make sure I have that completely explained or communicated. All right, so what you're going to need is basically a new class. You can call it whatever you want. I call it array algorithms. Make a main method. Remember, you can do that control spacebar trick. Type main and do control spacebar to get that in there. And then set up an array of IQs, and you might just want to use the same one I've got here just to keep it consistent, and then you'll be able to kind of test your code to make sure it's working correctly. Okay, and then we're just going to write methods and call them from main. So pause the video, get all that set up, and then we'll probably at least do the first one together. Okay, so this first method here is just going to display all the IQs. And it basically is going to be able to display any int array. So nothing needs to return to main here. We don't need a return type for this method because it's just going to print stuff out. So I'm going to, name my method whatever I want. So display array or something like that. And then I'm just going to pass in the array I want to display. In this case, my IQ scores array. Okay, so that's how it would be called from main. And then we have to go outside of main and actually create the method heading, right? So it'll look kind of like these method headings, right? Actually pretty similar to this one. So I'm just going to go down here and I have a little description for this one, but see if you can type out the heading. See what you remember for this display array. What would it look like? The heading at least. Okay, so it'll start public, static, and void because nothing's returned. And then we'll do the name, display array, and then it's going to take in an array of ints. So I'm going to do int bracket bracket to say it's an array type, and I'm going to give it a generic name like array. Okay, so we can pass in any int array and have them print out. The code is actually using IQ scores, but you could really pass in any array we want, and it should print it out. Okay, so we're just going to do our for loop from the other day where we loop through the elements one at a time. And if I use a reference one here, let's see if we can look back here. Remember that like this array here has length 5, but index is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So when we loop, we want I to take on those values, right? Basically, I is going to start at 0 and go less than the length. Is the easiest way to loop through I, and then we're going to print out names position I, or whatever the array is, position I. Okay, so we're going to do for int I equals 0. We're going to go I less than array.length plus plus I. And again, I encourage you to kind of, stop the video and fill this part in before watching it. Hopefully starting to make sense. And that process of trying to remember, even if you can't actually remember, the process of trying to remember will make a big difference for learning this stuff. Okay, so hopefully you've tried this line here, but we're just going to do sysout print, then we're going to do array position I, and that'll print out the ith one. All right, so we can kind of test this now. We're calling it here in main. We created it and then call it. We can see if it just prints them out one at a time. We can see, boom, it prints them out with the return. We could potentially not put the return there and just put a space, but however you want to do it, we'll just leave it that way for now. Okay, so for the method for finding the lowest value in the array, I want you to think about what is the input and output, right? Because when we do the method heading, we got to figure public static. Do we need a return type, right? Or is it going to be void or whatever? Okay, and so the input we're going to need here is the array again, because we're trying to find the lowest value for a specific set of numbers. So we're going to pass in that. So I'm going to call find lowest. I'm going to name it whatever we want. Pass in the array. But this one this time is going to return an int representing the lowest score. So I'm going to make an int called min and set it to be whatever is returned by our new method we're going to write here in a second. Okay, so that's what it'll look like in main. And then we just got to go down and write it. So it's going to be a lot like this other heading, public static. Instead of void, it's going to be an int, and we're going to call it find min, and we're going to take in an int array again. And I'm just going to use a generic array so that we can find the min of any int array. Okay, and then to actually find the min, this is actually kind of a tricky algorithm. So maybe pause here and see if you can think of the algorithm, and then possibly type out some of the code if you have any idea of what the code would look like. Okay, so hopefully you have a chance to think about this, but the way we're actually going to find the min is we're going to make another variable called min that just keeps track of the smallest one. All right, and then basically we're going to loop through like we always do, I from 0 to less than length. So this will be I up here. Okay, and then for each one, if it's smaller than the current min, it's going to become the new min. All right, so it just checks it one at a time, and we have like a min bucket that tracks it, and then we replace it. Okay, and so sort of the idea here, this line of code I've got here, is there's something called like the max value, which is the biggest number possible. And so the reason we would set it this way is that would guarantee that this first number would become the min right away. So outside the loop, I would set my min to be this monster number. I don't know what it actually is. It's probably not this, some power of 2, I'm sure. But anyways, it would be a big number so that the first time we would check, is this 16 less than the min? And since it is, it will overwrite it. This will get written and min will be now 16. Okay, and then what'll happen is I will just keep looping and we'll check the next one. Is 2 less than our min? Yep, it is. So we're gonna wipe this out and the min is now 2. And then let's keep checking. Is 5 less than 2? Nope, so we'll just skip over it. Is 1 less than 2? Yep, it is. So it'll just wipe it out and the min will become 1. And then we go all the way to the end and say, okay, is this last one less than the min? Nope, it's not. So the min just stays at 1 and then we're done. Okay, so we're going to loop through and keep track of the min each time. Okay, so I'm going to do an int min variable and I'm going to set it equal to, there is this thing called integer dot max value. So that's the highest possible. All right. Alternatively, you can actually set this to be position 0 in the array. So I kind of like that better in a way. It's just say, okay, let's just pretend the first one is the min. So we could do array position 0, right, as the initial value, so that this is the min, and then we just start looping through the other ones. I kind of prefer that. The only problem is that would assume that there's at least one element in the array. Because if they passed in a blank array, then there wouldn't be a position 0, and then we get an array index out bounds problem. So setting it to position 0 kind of assumes that there's one element. Right, so there's kind of 2 different ways. Maybe I'll put a little note here that you could also set this to be array position 0, and then your loop could start at 1 instead of 0. But anyways, we'll do it this way. So now I'm going to do for int I. Maybe I'll move this up a little bit. So for int I equals 0, I less than array dot length. So the same as we always do, plus plus I. Okay, and basically we're going to do if the value we're on, so array position I, is less than the min, then it's going to become the new min. So min will now become array position I. If it is smaller than the current min, it becomes the new min. Okay, and then it'll just keep updating it just like I showed here. It'll update it as we go through, tracking which one is the min of the ones we've encountered so far. All right, and then I could print it out here, but I think this one we're just going to return it to main. I guess I could print it out, but I'm going to do return min and then print it out in main. So I guess you could do it either way. It's just kind of a preference. So we'll go back up here, and now min is being returned by this. So we're just going to sys out print the min. Okay, and something is messed up. Public static int find min int array find lowest. So I did misnamed them. I'm calling a method called find lowest, but I named it find min down here. So I have to make a match. So sometimes I'll copy and paste just to make sure I don't make that mistake. So I'm going to do find min, I guess. So I'm going to go up here and change this to find min. Sorry about the confusion. So I'm going to call find min, store it here, and then print it out. So I can give this a shot and see. It should be 75. It looks like it's working right. Oh no, 50. Sorry, I'm dumb. There's the min at the end, 50. Okay, and we'll see that that should keep working no matter what. So if I add another min here, like 1 earlier in the array, and then run it, it will find that min of 1. Okay, so looks like it's working okay. I'm going to knock this out here. And then for the other two, I'm going to make a second video just because we ran out of time here. So thank you for watching part 1.